Yes, Spurs have lost 8 of their last 11 in the Premier League and are winless in 2026. Their interim manager, Igor Tudor's future is in serious doubt, although the club is treating the situation with sensitivity after the unfortunate passing of his father. The last time Spurs dropped out of the top division was back in 1977, when they were relegated to the second tier under manager Keith Birkinshaw. To make sense of what's going on at the Tottenham Stadium is Chris Cowlin from Spurs Chat. Chris, welcome to the show, pal. You all right?
Hello, Dan. Thanks for having me on.
I was watching your game against Nottingham Forest on Sunday, just before the League Cup final, and you had a huge amount of opportunities to take in that game. Forest are so very good. They're so very good at being comfortable without the ball. But like by half time, you'd had something like 9 corners to their 1, and you were losing. Is firepower the issue, or is it a lot deeper than that?
Well, I think it's a lot deeper than that. We've got so many issues at the moment, and as you said there in the intro, we've gone now 13 games in the top flight without a win, and this is our worst run for 91 years since 1935. And I tell you what, the times under Thomas Frank earlier on in the season, that was tough. But I tell you what, this recent period under Igor Tudor, when of course Spurs have made this change, this has been even tougher. The defeats against Arsenal, Fulham, Crystal Palace, and Nottingham Forest in the Premier League under Tudor, we have been very, very well beaten. And you mentioned the game there on Sunday against Forest. Let me first say by saying that the fans were absolutely magnificent before the game. They were really up for the game, and they were egging the players on to get a win and put a performance in. And we feel really let down by the performance and by that result on Sunday, because, like you mentioned as well, the corners, the set pieces, I felt that were very important, but we just didn't execute them at all. Didn't score from one, and Nottingham Forest had scored, I think, the second most in the Premier League from corners this season. So that was certainly an area where we needed to exploit, but we certainly didn't. But firepower is definitely an issue. Every single time we've had a transfer window, we've left disappointed. And, every single time we've brought in a player, it's never been an upgrade. It's been more of a downgrade when we've let a quality player leave. So there's a lot of problems at the moment. But, these next 7 Premier League games are absolutely vital. And, for me, I think that Spurs do need to change the manager again in this international break period, and, to give us a chance, because 1 point above the relegation zone right now, we're all fretting and we're all feeling like we're going to be playing the Championship next season. Hence why I'm on this podcast.
Well, that's it. I mean, imagine if West Brom had taken points off of Villa on Sunday. West Ham had taken points off of Villa on Sunday, and you'd have been in there. Villa actually did you a favour on Sunday. It's incredible to watch. I mean, you're talking about transfer windows and things like that. Daniel Levy gets a lot of stick, even though he's left the club. How much of that critique is still fair?
Well, I think a lot of people have backtracked in their opinions about Daniel Levy and the way that we have done things in the past, but decision making overall from the owners and the board members, ever since we moved into that stadium, I could talk to you all day about this. We sacked Mauricio Pochettino, having taken us to a Champions League final, didn't spend a penny in 518 days, multiple transfer windows, sacked Jose Mourinho 6 days before a cup final. Of course, Antonio Conte, that famous rant, come out and said, what he did, a lot of truth in there as well. But you mentioned, the West Ham game there. If they had beaten Villa, we would have been in the bottom 3. Well, when we do return from the international break, we play on the Sunday away at Sunderland, and West Ham host Wolves on the Friday. So we could, by the time we play Sunderland, we could be sitting in the bottom 3. But I do really feel that these recent games against Crystal Palace and Nottingham Forest, and the way that we lost these games, particularly at home, there is a real harsh reality now amongst this fan base that, if we don't buck our ideas up and fast and make this change and replace Igor Tudor, I do think we will be playing Championship football. Because you also mentioned about West Ham. You could talk about Wolves, you could talk about Leeds, you could talk about Nottingham Forest. All of these teams have picked up far more points than us. We're the only Premier League team at the moment not to have won a Premier League game in the calendar year of 2026. And all of these teams in and around us are not only beating us, but they're picking up points in other games, and they're showing real fight and desire
Yeah.
And these Spurs players at the moment need to step up, and we need to see a lot more from them, because it's fair to say that we know that they are capable of a lot more. And also, Igor Tudor was brought in to be this firefighter, and brought in to be this guy to get Spurs out of trouble. And he's gained 1 point out of a possible 15, and that was an unexpected point away at Liverpool. But these players need to give a whole lot more.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do. I mean, look, it's going to sound like I'm having a dig at you based on the Cundy O'Hara that we had last week, on the generational run that they're on. But like, to make matters worse, right, after the international break, you've got a trip to Sunderland, as you mentioned, and Vicario's out with a hernia surgery. Do you start Kinski?
We have to. Of course, the other option is Austin, but I think that they will go with Kinski. But I think that there is a lot more to this before the game. The managerial situation, what's going to happen there. I do hope that Tudor is replaced, but when you talk about team selections, Javi Simons, for instance, he had a fantastic game against Atletico Madrid, and I'll be honest with you, Dan, it was a positive week up until that Forest game.
It really was. I thought you were going to batter him.
Yeah, I spoke to so many Spurs fans on that Sunday before the Forest game, and the atmosphere was incredible outside when the coach turned up, and everyone was up for the match. And we really thought that Liverpool game, that point at Liverpool, and then the win and the performance was a really decent one, which we haven't seen at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium too often in the last couple of years, let alone this season. But we all thought it was a turning point. But then when Javi Simons was on the bench for the Nottingham Forest game, we were all scratching our heads. I don't think there was a fan in the stadium or at home thinking, why on earth is Javi Simons not starting? So there has been some really weird decisions, and he's tried different formations. He's tried a lot of different things at Spurs. He's also said that he didn't realise how hard this job was going to be. Of course, he's been a saviour for various clubs in Serie A, but as we all know, the Premier League is very, very different, and he's found it out very, very, very fast.
Okay, so if there's a decision made about the managerial hot seat at Tottenham Hotspur, who do you want in? Have you got your eye on anybody they've got to be available right now, haven't they?
I don't think there's a Tottenham fan that hasn't said this already, Dan, and I feel exactly the same. I do feel like we need an ex-player or an ex-manager to come in now and be our saviour, and where it means something, to them, where they've worn the badge or they've got an affiliation with Spurs, and there are so many out there that have offered their services, the likes of Redknapp and Hoddle, and even Poyet on talkSPORT the other day said that he would take the job, and Chris Hughton I think would be a good shout as well. Of course, he's been a player, he's been a coach, he's worked at the club for many years as well, and I think he'd be a good shout with Premier League experience. So I think that as a collective, I think perhaps 2 or 3 of these individuals where they've played for the club before, bring them in, and at the moment, although the fans were absolutely sensational on Sunday, we need the support in these next 7 games. We don't need people giving up on this Tottenham Hotspur team right now. I know it's very, very tough. I'm a fan that goes home and away, and this season has been extremely tough, but we've got to stick by them and we've got to support them. And let's hope that we stay in the Premier League, come May.
I like your positivity, Chris. Don't forget that Sky Sports is the home of the EFL with over 1,000 live matches. Stream Sky Sports coverage of the EFL on now. 18 plus stream via internet. Terms apply.
Stay ahead of the game on talkSPORT 2 with Sky Sports.
It can't go on like this, can it?
It can.
Yes, it's time for our regular slot, You Tell Me. A sly nod to that classic manager's comeback when the questions get a bit too tricky. Today, it's a Spurs special, and we're asking Chris the inevitable question, is relegation to the Championship exactly what Spurs need? Chris, am I being overly facetious there?
Well, from a fan's point of view, I certainly don't want to be seeing Spurs in the Championship, because when I look at the table, you look at some of the teams here, Hull City, Ipswich, Southampton, Derby, Watford, Norwich, Birmingham, QPR, go on all day talking about all of these teams. When you go down to the Championship, there is absolutely no guarantee at all that you're going to come straight back, or even, the following years. So I don't think it would be a good thing for Tottenham, no. And I do worry about a lot of decision making as well. Recruitment hasn't been good enough in recent years. And, if Spurs did go down to the Championship, I think that the squad would be decimated. We'd lose a lot of players, and there's no guarantee of replacing these players either. So absolutely not.
Yeah, do you know what? That's really interesting. I think a lot of fans, when they get to the bottom of the league, will go, do you know what? We convince ourselves that this might be what we need and we can get all these players off the books and stuff like that. And we've had a Leicester fan earlier on today that said, no, I don't want that either. And I kind of agree. I mean, I don't trust your owners to put their hands in their pockets in the right place to get you out of that league.
Do you know what, Dan? It's fair to say as well that I've seen and spoke to a lot of fans saying that, you know, the board and the owners deserve the relegation, but from a fan's point of view, I certainly don't want that. But you're right. You know, the decision making needs to be a lot better. Things need to change massively at the football club. You know, we were told at the start of the season that Ange Postecoglou got the sack because we wanted to be fighting on all fronts. You know, out of all the cup competitions. You know, yes, we've had a lot of injuries, but sitting 17th, 1 point above the relegation zone, and like I mentioned earlier, we could be sitting in the bottom three next time we play a Premier League game. And I think then people will really, you know, believe the seriousness of this situation. But these next 7 games are like 7 huge cup finals that we have to get more from, because at the moment it is fair to say that, you know, where is Spurs' next point coming from? There's no easy game in the Premier League,
no.
And the way that we are playing, you would think that Spurs are going to go down. So something dramatic needs to change. But I completely agree with you on the board decisions. You know, decisions need to be a lot better. Thomas Frank should have gone a lot earlier, in my opinion, as well, because to bring in a manager to give them a bit more of a chance to turn things around. Igor Tudor has come in. They have to hold their hands up now and say, look, this hasn't worked. We need another throw at the dice of it. But decision making has been absolutely dire and dreadful, and you know, things need to improve. But you know, next 7 games are absolutely massive for our future.
Chris Cowlin, Spurs Chat. Thanks a lot, pal.
Thank you.
Cheers, pal. And don't forget, if